Have you ever stopped and just wondered what makes you tick? Well, today, we're kind of like psychological detectives. We're going to sift through some of the biggest ideas in personality science to try and answer that one huge question. What makes you, you? Let's dive right in. No, really think about it for a second. Are you just a product of your earliest relationships? Or maybe you're guided by a biological blueprint you were born with? Or are you the one consciously writing your own story? We're going to look for clues in some fascinating and, yeah, sometimes pretty controversial research. All right, so our first clue takes us way back. All the way to the very beginning. Long before you had conscious thoughts or could even talk, these powerful instinctual bonds were already starting to shape you, shaping your ability to survive and connect with the world around you. So check this out. It's a tale of two very different experiments. Over on the left, you've got Conrad Lorenz's little goslings imprinting on him. That's a hardwired, instinctual bond. But on the right, Harry Harlow's famous monkey experiment asked a much deeper question. Do we form these bonds just to get food, or is there something else going on? And what he found? Wow, it was a total game changer. Harlow's baby monkeys, they overwhelmingly chose the soft cloth mother that offered no food over the cold wire mother that did. The takeaway was crystal clear. Comfort, warmth, emotional security, these aren't just nice little extras. They are a primary biological need. And that idea completely flipped our understanding of how we form our first and most important attachments. Okay, so we've established that those early bonds are super powerful. But here's the million-dollar question. Are they a life sentence? And this brings us to one of the greatest debates in all of psychology. Are we just forever defined by our childhood, or can we actually break free and write our own future? In one corner, you've got the heavyweight, Sigmund Freud. He basically argued that our adult personalities are pretty much set by unconscious struggles we had way back in our childhood. But in the other corner, you have Gordon Allport, a humanist who said, hold on a minute. He believed that healthy adults are guided by conscious choices and can become, independent of their past. Allport's central idea was this really cool concept called functional autonomy. What does that mean? Well, it's the idea that a motive that starts for one reason can totally evolve into something new. What begins as just a means to an end can become an end in itself, a core part of who we are. He used this perfect metaphor, a tree. Obviously a tree comes from a seed, right? But once it's fully grown, it doesn't need that seed anymore to survive. It's self-sustaining. Allport argued our motivations can be just like that. We can outgrow our original seeds. Here's a perfect real-world example. Say you start a job just to pay the bills. You need financial stability. But years down the line, you're still working just as hard. Not because of the money, but because the pursuit of excellence, that strong work ethic, has become a core part of your values. It's now part of your identity. That's functional autonomy right there. All right, so we've looked at our early bonds and our amazing ability to grow beyond them, but what if there's another major force at play? What if a big part of our personality is kind of baked into our biology right from the very start? And that brings us to the work of Hans Eysenck. He proposed that personality wasn't this infinitely complex thing. Instead, he thought it could be mapped onto a few core dimensions, like where you fall on the scale from introversion to extroversion. And he believed these fundamental traits were largely inherited and stayed surprisingly stable throughout your entire life. Now, it is really important to note here that Eysenck's legacy is, well, it's complicated. He made some highly controversial claims about group differences in intelligence, especially related to race. And it's crucial to understand that those specific ideas are considered scientifically problematic and are widely rejected by the scientific community today. So while some of his ideas were controversial, Eysenck's work on traits did help pave the way for more modern theories. So let's look at one of the most comprehensive maps of personality we have today. It's called the Hexaco model. It builds on that earlier research, but adds a really crucial new layer. So the Hexaco model gives us 6 broad dimensions of personality. You've got honesty, humility, emotionality, extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness to experience. But the real game changer here, the key innovation, is that first one, honesty, humility. This dimension gets at our tendencies for things like sincerity, fairness, and modesty. And as you're about to see, it is a critical piece of the personality puzzle. So far, we've mapped out the foundational parts of personality, the biological bits, the structural pieces, but our investigation wouldn't be complete if we didn't explore what psychologists sometimes call the darker dimensions of who we are. This is known as the dark triad.
It's a group of three related but distinct traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Now, it's so important to remember, we are talking about subclinical traits here. This is not about clinical diagnoses, it's about tendencies that, frankly, everyone has to some degree or another.
First up is Machiavellianism. This trait is all about strategic manipulation. It's this combination of having a cynical view of other people, being a careful calculator, and having a kind of emotional distance that helps you achieve your goals. Next, there's narcissism. And this is way more than just self-confidence. It's a trait that's defined by a constant need for other people's admiration, a real sense of entitlement, and often being super sensitive to any kind of criticism. Think about a character like Regina George from Mean Girls, someone who is just constantly driven by status and what other people think.
And finally, there's subclinical psychopathy. Its main features are an emotional coldness, so a lack of empathy and remorse. And that's combined with being highly impulsive and a tendency to take big risks. A good example is a character like Jordan Belfort in The Wolf of Wall Street, that reduced concern for how his actions affect others in the chase for money and excitement.
And this is where our whole story comes full circle. Remember that honesty-humility dimension from the Hexaco model we talked about? Well, it turns out that it's the single strongest predictor of the dark triad traits, but in the opposite direction. So a high level of sincerity, fairness, and modesty is, in a way, the psychological inverse of narcissism, manipulation, and callousness. So in the end, we're left with all these different lenses to look at ourselves: the powerful bonds from our past, our ability to grow beyond them, our potential biological blueprint, and this detailed map of our traits, both the light and the dark. Each one offers a different piece of the puzzle of who you are. So the final question is, as you look at your own life, which of these lenses reveals the most about you?